Yeah, and we're live. We are live, guys, from Sweden. Greetings. It's a sunny, beautiful day, and we have a super exciting agenda for today. Something that is very warm to my heart after 20 years of telecom experience. This is the Telecom project in blockchain. So we're here to find out, is it real or is it just a fad? And I think actually I've been part of inventing some of the technology that this project uses. So who are you guys? Maybe Micky, you start.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for having us, CTO Larsson. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm Micky Watkins. I'm the CEO and the founder of World Mobile. I've been in the telecommunications industry for the last 20 years, and mostly the last 10 years working out how to bridge the last mile.
And you're on the mobile phone right now. Is that not right?
Absolutely correct. The purpose is there, right? Most of the people connecting to our network will actually be connected on mobile phones rather than PCs. So I'll fly the flag and I'll use the same devices they'll be using too.
Exactly. Thank you. And with us, we also have my fellow technology man, James.
Hi, yeah. So I'm a techie. Let's see, I've been trying to connect the unconnected, mainly when I'm unconnected, of course, for more than 20 years. I was the first person to make a VoIP call on a mobile phone. So that was one of the things that I've done. And I'm now working with Micky to do this, go big and do this on a big scale.
It is fantastic. And I mean, there's been a few telecom projects in the blockchain space, but none have really gotten anywhere. And I have a good Swedish friend who is a huge fan of the Cardano ecosystem, and he has said to me many times, Anders, you need to bring this team on the show and listen to what they are doing, both with my experience in technology space and also because are you the biggest project or are you just the most talked about project running token project running on top of Cardano?
Yeah, we are the largest token project on Cardano.
So this is exciting from so many different ways, and you are very ambitious with your project. So, Micky, why don't you start? I know a little bit about the project. We have talked a couple of times. I've of course studied, but even for people who know about your project, it's interesting to hear it a little bit from the start. What are you trying to do?
Okay, so there's a fundamental problem on the planet right now. Approximately half of the world's, the ITU will say 3 billion, others will say 2.9 billion, Mozilla will say more than 3 billion, but there's approximately 3 billion people on the planet that are unconnected, they're unable to get connectivity. This is not because mobile network operators don't want to connect them, this is because legacy infrastructure, and we believe legacy business models, are not profitable. For them to go and deploy this kind of technology out to rural areas or areas where there needs to be huge coverage to connect people. Africa, as an example, the continent has over 1.2 billion people, around 800 million people unconnected with an average age of 19 years old. So from a business perspective, this is a massive opportunity, but from a human perspective, this is something that must be done by somebody because it's not right that half the world cannot speak to the other half the world. Think of what we're missing out on. We talk about a global village that the internet is. Well, it's not a global village. It's a global half a village. And we want to fix this. You know, this is something that we've been working on individually and collectively with our entire team for over 20 years. As I said in the beginning, the last 10 years has been working out which technologies that I can use. And the last 5 years has been really successful in many proof of concepts across different continents. It's a huge problem, and it's something that we actually have a solution to fix. Bringing blockchain into it adds a whole new element, right? With digital identity, 3 billion people don't have banks. They're not banked. The reason they don't have banks is mostly because they cannot identify themselves, but firstly because they cannot connect and get online. But then you look at the African market and you say, there's 400 million mobile wallets in the African market. That means that people are taking their cell phones home where there's no connectivity. And then they're going out and walking or catching a bus or riding a bike or however they get to the place with connectivity, and they're banking. So for us, the continent of Africa is a very exciting proposition and something where we can unlock the world's biggest gig economy, and we can bring everybody online using our technology. But the same can be said for the USA. 30% of the USA is uncovered, and there's around 140 countries in the world that have huge connectivity problems. I'm not too sure in Sweden, Ericsson being based there. Obviously, that's a joke.
You'd be surprised. My old mother has a summer house, which is, it's in kind of in the forest by a lake, but it's not that far out. It's, I don't know, 15 minutes from the next big city. And up until this year, actually, she could not get internet coverage at her summer house, which is really sad, because I've kind of been part of creating the whole technology, and still I couldn't get any of the Swedish operators to cover my mom's summer house. So it's definitely not fully covered even in Sweden. And it's not that both in Africa and by the lake in Sweden, it's not that the technology doesn't exist. It's a business consideration, right? That maybe it doesn't make sense to put up one other base station if there's only, she and one other person living in that coverage area. It's too expensive, so they rather not have that customer. And same then for many customers in Africa, the business model hasn't matched. There hasn't been a match of how much these people are willing or able to pay, and what it costs to run a mobile subscription service to those people. It's maybe not only the infrastructure, but customer care and everything that's around it. And clearly it hasn't matched, because then they would be connected, and they are not, as you say. And in many cases, maybe it's not even a coverage problem. It's maybe that the business model hasn't matched. And I feel when we talked the first time, that what is so exciting with this is that the mobile operators, they only address one part. They address the mobile service. But we come, now that we spent many years in the blockchain space, we see the other part of that what if they could get, like you said, they could get coverage, access to the internet, and maybe banking services. And that's maybe something that match isn't telecom alone. It's a combination. And yeah, exactly. And I mean,
telecom is the first step, right?
Exactly, it's the first step.
The first step done, well, where are you going? So you're charging for data, and you're charging for voice minutes. The voice minute market has been broken. You've got WhatsApp, Viber, WeChat, a ton of apps that do peer-to-peer calling. So
exactly.
there's 1,000 mobile network operators in the world, and they're competing for the half the world that is there. There's no one covering the rest. And
exactly, no one wants really to have those. No one wants to have those people as customers, and that's why they're not connected. And because maybe the business model in isolation doesn't work. And the same thing for the banks. There is no business case for them to bank these people, or they would have been banked already. But maybe there is a business case to do both as one solution and one package, and bring them both services, both the value of having access to internet and the value of being connected to some sort of financial system that is much cheaper and more inclusive than the old financial system. And I feel that's what's so exciting about what you're doing. It's really the blend here of technology, connectivity technology, and bringing blockchain at the same time. And then maybe there is a business case for all these billions of people.
If you build your stack with infrastructure in mind, so you've got to have power, you've got to have connectivity, you've got to have cheap enough connectivity, not just for the end user, but for the mobile operator to actually go out there and launch. It's not like the 1,000 mobile network operators don't want these customers. They actually do, but they can't reach them profitably. But what the difference between what we're building in our stack is there's an infrastructure layer, there's a settlement financial layer, and then there's a whole open layer where services can be offered. So that's whether that's traditional finance and plugging into APIs and working with local partners, or whether that's DeFi. And all of a sudden, by enabling people to have power to charge their devices, because remember, in a lot of these remote areas, there's also infrastructure problems with power too, right? So our solution with solar, our solution with the connectivity, the different spectrums that we use, unlicensed, free spectrums, and the patents that we have, all of a sudden we are literally lighting up a village or a town or a massive amount of area that didn't have that before. But then you are totally right. Once they are connected, that's when the world really opens. And then they have access to potentially even more quality tools and opportunities than we have, because we're kind of segmented into very centralized stuff, right? PayPal and the crypto market's very small as it stands right now. If you talk about finance, it's very hard to disrupt those markets. We're not looking to disrupt. We're looking to actually bring in the stack and let people utilize and grab opportunity with their own hands. And you need these three things. And in parallel, as we build, this is what we're building. We're not just building a connectivity layer. We're building a whole ecosystem where people can absolutely benefit from these opportunities of what you can get online.
No, absolutely. Exactly. And thanks for, I expressed myself very poorly. Of course, the operators would have liked to have these customers, but they haven't found a way to do it profitably. Yeah. So we will come back to the, progress of the project and everything what you want to do. But let's jump right into the technology also, because I love technology. I want to hear more about the technology. So how does this work in short? What is it and how does it work? James.
Okay, well, it is a cellular network, right? It is a cellular network using 4G and 5G technology and also Wi-Fi 6. And if you know now, the Wi-Fi 6 standard and the cellular standard actually sort of somewhat got harmonized. So, a lot of the technology that's in one stack is in the other stack and so on. So that's what we're doing. We're using these advanced technologies. Micky talks about 3 billion people on the planet not having internet. Now, Microsoft have a project called what's it, Airband, I think.
Airband.
And that's much. It's in fact much higher, because what you need is functional connectivity. So what Micky is doing at the moment, which is connecting off his mobile phone, needs a good stream of at least 2-3 megabits per second for video to do this. And if you look at, could someone participate in online education using Zoom or something like that, the number of people who've actually got that drops quite dramatically.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is making sure that we build a network that has two things, right? Low cost, because if you're going to connect people who are unconnected, they tend to be unconnected for a reason, and that's very often an economic reason. But also that has the necessary bandwidth, so that you can bring them, you can leapfrog all of the stuff in between and bring them straight to functional internet. Now, functional internet in America, the FCC define it as 5 meg down, 1 meg up. I'm not sure whether, we can debate whether that's a good definition, but that's their definition. And so that's quite that's quite a sort of challenging. It's not challenging, but it's a good marker. It's like we need to provide grade A internet, to all of the people in this footprint. And obviously, commercially, we can do that and say, well, we are offering you a fixed and a mobile experience. Now, of course, the technologies that are used to deliver those are basically all wireless technologies. So it's wireless broadband and it's wireless cellular. But that's what we're doing. So, how do you break the cost problem? And there are really two things you do, right? One of the biggest costs of deploying cellular and so on is the fact that you've got, traditional mobile operators will have an enormous team that goes and scouts sites and then negotiates to buy them and leases them and manages them and send trucks to those sites, 25 times. I counted it when they tried to put something into my home, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very expensive. So what we're doing is using the power of community, where a person who has got a rooftop or has got some useful piece of land, they build the site. So rather than we have to find enormous amounts of capital to build sites, the community builds the sites. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're deploying tall stuff, right? So aerostats, which are 300 meters high, 1,000 feet if you're in the USA. And those can broadcast out to the horizon 60, 70 kilometers.
Yeah.
And means you
just to stop and explain a little bit for everyone who maybe not have their high school trigonometry at the top of their head. If you're quite close to the ground and you're looking forward, you start pretty near, then start getting too many trees, too many small hills, and you can't see very far if you're standing just a little bit above the ground. While if you get higher and higher up, the angle that you can look down on becomes much higher. So you can see then much further and have a line of sight to someone who is standing much further away. That's why all the towers that you see, whatever country you live in, if you go on the countryside, there are towers, and they try to, there's like an optimization, trying to build them as high as possible without the cost getting ridiculously high and within some legal parameters. But if it's in a city, you can't put up these towers in most countries, then maybe you're limited by the rooftop height, and that's not very high. So if you can get up like 300 meters, you can see really far and still give good coverage to someone standing far away.
Just to jump in there as well, for terminology, sorry, James, to interrupt you. An aerostat is a tethered balloon, essentially. Don't tell the companies we're working with, we call them balloons, but that's what they are. It's an envelope that is in the sky, tethered to the ground. It doesn't float around, and it's usually tethered by three tethers. And then on the bottom of the aerostat, the balloon, you're able to stick a payload, and that payload has multiple different things in it, and James will tell you what they are. But an aerostat is essentially a balloon at 300 meters that can also go up to 1,000 meters, and that also can go up to 20,000 meters with the stratosphere. As you go up, you have different considerations for your payload and weight and science and maths that you need to do. But the end game, the initial game is for an immediate solution to connect the unconnected is these 300 meters. The end game is a dynamic network, which James will go into now, starting at 20,000 meters and working its way down.
Yeah, so the trick, so aerostats don't carry a lot of weight, right? Well, you can carry enormous amounts of weight with them. I mean, you can carry tons, but then they cost millions of dollars. So you want to have something that is a manageable cost and therefore carries a smallish amount of weight. So like 60 kilograms, which is, a small human being, not me. Then the trick to do is to put a very advanced antenna on that, which transmits the radio signal, and then link that with fiber to the ground. And so all of the computation, all of the waveform generation, and so on, is all done on the ground. And then the very final thing that's done in the air is power amplification and so on.
And you power it also from the ground, right? So there is no battery. It doesn't need to be pulled down and recharged and so on. Is that correct?
No solar in the balloon. You can put solar on the ground, of course, so that you can be very green. And because you can put solar on the ground, you can spread it out as much as you need in order to provide yourself with enough power in the air. But that's right. The only thing that goes in the air is the head end for the radio.
Yes.
Everything else is on the ground. And then that radio head end is multi-frequency, and it's a multi-user MIMO. So you can either point most of it in one direction, or you can have it talk to lots of people if they're a little bit closer to you. So it's quite advanced. So it's basically 5G, but in Africa using a 4G signal a lot of the time because the handsets are still 4G.
Exactly. And also to a recap for everyone who hasn't spent the last 20 years thinking about this. So if you have really big coverage, you can cover a huge area, and you get that with this balloon. And the higher you send it, then the bigger coverage area you can get. And then you can, because people won't join all at the same time. People will gradually come into your network. And then if you can cover a big area, you can kind of fill up the capacity with people from a huge area. Then you don't need so big initial capital investment. And a traditional operator who build lower towers, they cannot really do that. They need to put the coverage, otherwise you can't sell it. I mean, if they have only coverage here and there, they're not going to like the service. So they need to build a huge number of towers first, because they build them lower. And then in the beginning, the network is pretty empty, and then they hope that over the course of 5 years or something like that, they're going to sign up enough people to fill it up. But it becomes very capital intensive in the beginning, and a quite long return of that. While if you can cover a big area with one base station that you do, you don't need to have so much capital investment in the beginning, because you can have fewer of those and still fill up the capacity with people that are more spread out. And then as more and more people come onto the network, you can make the cells smaller, because then you have a nice problem. You have a lot of customers, they need more capacity, and then you can make the cells smaller and reuse the frequency. That's why it's called cellular system. You can start with one huge cell if you can get the balloon high enough, and then you can split that into 2 or 3 cells, and each of those can reuse the frequencies, and you can then triple the capacity almost, and then when that is full, you can make this cell smaller again, and you can triple the capacity again. You can keep doing this almost as many times, or not quite infinitely amount of time, but you can do it great number of times until you get down to what's called small cells, which is really, really small cells. And then you can reuse the frequency a great number of times, just how Wi-Fi works. Most of the neighbors in the building here were on the kind of same frequency, and it still works because the coverage is really small. So just explainer.
It's a scale problem, right? So people say, oh, you can't get fiber in Africa and all, it's not true, right? I can phone someone in Africa and get fiber to most places inside of a month, but it's very expensive, right? So if you say someone like Tanzania or Kenya, it's about slightly bigger than England. England has 12,000 base stations per operator, not including all of the tiny small cells and rooftops and so on, right? So 12,000 base stations, if you put it into Kenya, I mean, how much that's going to take me 30 years. So if you put aerostats in, you can put, say, 120 aerostats and get basic coverage the whole country. It's just I can actually drive to all those sites,
exactly.
In a year, let alone my lifetime. You can manage them, and you can sort them out and organize them. So it's an organizational scale problem. So you look at a mobile operator in the UK, they have 20,000 employees, right? To get to that scale, to get and it took them very often a decade to get their network there. So we want something that we can network in 2.5 years, cover the whole country, with the reasonable amount of capacity, and then, as you say, we can then look and see, oh, look, there's tons of usage over there. I wonder what it is. Well, you usually look at Google, but it's a school, or it's a hospital, or it's a college campus, and then you can get fiber into there very quickly and take that load off your aerostat network. And you just just looking for the hotspots. Say, right, take that one out, take that one out, take that one out. Great, the network is within capacity. Exactly.
So then
I'd also like to add something as well. So
yes, please.
It's on the payload itself. We also propagate IoT. We also propagate AIS. IoT, people are very familiar with the Helium model. There's not really a market yet for IoT in terms of profitability, as has been recently discovered. But for AIS, wherever we are near the sea, all of a sudden we start to be able to provide countries that didn't have AIS and where weren't able to track their boats, their fishing vessels, frauds, pirates, whatever you want to name it. So these balloons, these aerostats, they're literally not just making a smart village or a smart city, it's making a smart country. And each balloon talks to each other, and each balloon talks to the base stations on the ground. So if one bit falls down, you're able to cover it from another space. And then if you think about it from another level, low Earth orbit satellites, we can use them as backhaul and plug them straight in. And instead of it being one person's connection or a shared Wi-Fi connection in a village or in a house, all of a sudden you can propagate a LEO or 3 LEOs plugged in, depending on the bands, if you've got the bandwidth, of course, to propagate across 5,000, 10,000 people. So we are working with people like Starlink, and we are working with Sigfox and LoRaN providers to make sure that this happens. And then just to finalize what the aerostat can do as well, LEOs are not just for downloading, right? They're also for uploading. So all of a sudden you can take a signal, a stream, shoot it up to a satellite and drop it over very, very quickly on the other side of the world. So it really is an innovation that nobody's commercialized yet. SoftBank are having a good go at it for emergency disaster relief. World Mobile are looking to do it as a complete commercial solution to providing connectivity. But aerostats have been around for many, many years. People might remember an aerostat thinking that it's full of hydrogen and a big explosion that we always see online. But actually, if you look at many military applications, dynamic networks have been used in the military. Aerostats are used in the military to provide coverage to ground units and to soldiers and to tanks to allow them to be able to communicate in places where there is no signal.
Yeah.
So whilst we talk about these aerostats, experimental, they're not. Innovation that we're sticking on the bottom of our payload to be able to provide IoT, AIS, free space optics. We're working with a Google X project called Tara. All of this can be stuck to the bottom of an aerostat, and you're able to do many, many things that you can't do on a cell tower.
Will you also use small cells? You talk about the community can build the network. Is that the small cell part?
Yes, exactly. So when you see a I mean, obviously, I'm trying to paint a picture as that I organize this in some way. Of course, I don't. It just sort of happens. But when you see a hotspot, you want to encourage or a small cell to go in that hotspot to take off the load. So a small cell is just a small cell, right?
Exactly.
Move back and forth over fiber. It generally has quite high capacity, but it's not designed to have high range because you don't really want it to push out and interfere with other cells. So then they end up being a bit of a mesh in a campus environment, and they have to coexist with this aerostat coverage that's coming in from high. And there's a bunch of software that makes sure they coexist, which is the dynamic network. So that because we're not a managed network, where it's not as if I'm saying, right, this goes here, you go on this frequency, you do this, you down point your antenna by 2 degrees, we have no interference now, great, which is what a regular mobile operator is doing. We just have to let it self-organize, and it just has to do it on the fly. And if someone picks up their small cell and moves it to the other end of campus because they've moved offices or for whatever reason, it just needs to work it out and keep going, in real time. And by real time, I mean in under a second.
Yeah. I'm very happy to hear that, because I was part of creating the small cell concept when I worked at Ericsson in what is it? It must be 16, 17 years ago now. We had an idea that we could take a mobile phone and this was still on 2G then. It's maybe more than 50. It's a huge number of years ago, and 2G uplink and downlink is kind of similar. So we could take a mobile phone and switch the send and receive, and suddenly we could make a very small base station that cost a few $100, while before a base station is like huge and comes on a truck and cost tens of thousands of dollars. And we called it the femto then, because you have a macro, micro, pico, and then next one would be femto. So it was really small and so on. But as always, as all innovation, it takes a staggering amount of time until it really gains traction. And usually the first iteration of something is always, it's like the first iPhone. No one really bought the first iPhone because it was, good, but maybe not good enough for mass market use. And the same thing with this. It took a great many generations until the product really becomes useful. But it is definitely
First of all, thank you. You made our job a lot easier. We appreciate that. Second of all, we're very much about using off-the-shelf hardware. Sure, we have our own patents. Sure, we have our own proprietary software. But wherever we possibly can, we're leaning on the research and development of the great people like the Ericssons, the Samsungs, the Google. OneWeb started off in the sky as low Earth orbited satellite, didn't work out, but they brought down elements, the free space optics elements. Free space optics is incredible. Not when it rains. So you've got to have a hybrid, but it can fire 20 gigabytes a second over 20 kilometers quite easily, and that's without fine tuning it.
Exactly.
So it's all about using off-the-shelf hardware and not taking 10 years for us to develop the solutions that we have.
Exactly. And I mean, the two ideas at that time, there were exactly those two ideas that you talked about here. One is that you're kind of, by intentionally making the range less, you can reuse the frequency a great number of times. You can get a lot of capacity, because in many poor places of the world, the population density is quite high, I mean, people, they live in cities and the population density is quite high. So capacity need is still big, even if people are poor. If they should have 5 megabit per second each, they will consume a lot of data. So, we need to reuse the frequencies for it to work. And the second part was really this, that instead of the operator sitting and, with brightest minds trying to figure out where is the optimal location for each base station, why not let the people who use it figure that out instead, because they're much more motivated. So they will spend the whole day and the whole night walking around trying different locations. Where can we get the best coverage? A little bit like you do with your Wi-Fi at home. Should I have a mesh in the kitchen, or where should I put it so it works in the backyard? And the motivation to make it work is much bigger. So if can enable that, and it would be fantastic if it's really you in the end who make that come to life in rural or in densely populated cities in Africa where there's quite a lot of people. That would be amazing. So, I mean, before we move on to the project, and we should make sure we have time for questions also, I just want to say that, I mean, the basic technology that the gentlemen here are talking about, having like a very high point of creating coverage, that is very real. That's the ideal situation, to get it as high up as possible to create coverage, and then to add capacity with community-based locations using small cells. That is legit. That is definitely the whole idea with the telecom system. So I'm very happy I was very excited. I mean, this is not new for me today, because we talked before and I knew that, but I just want to say that is 100% true and legit. And should we talk a little bit about the project also? How far have you come? Because ideas are great and all, but what about execution? At the end of the day, everything comes down to execution. So how far have you come, and so on? And maybe we can also straighten out the vocabulary, because I apologize, I wrote in my tweet World Mobile Token, but I should have written World Mobile Team in that situation. And what's the difference? What's the token? What's the team? And how far have you come in your project?
We are one, right? The World Mobile cannot run without World Mobile Token, and World Mobile Token cannot run without World Mobile. But because we're a regulated body who needs to operate in just in Africa and 50 plus countries, we need to make sure that we stay within the right side of regulation. So World Mobile Token is the blood around the ecosystem, essentially. It's the token that makes the ecosystem run. World Mobile is the hardware and the software that allows the mobile telecom network to run. So where are we at right now? So stage one was we launched the token generation event, and that was to enable the maximum distribution of tokens to as many people as possible, and also to see the appetite for a sharing economy to connect the unconnected. We managed to do this. Stage two was developing the air nodes, or further developing the air nodes and deploying them and getting them into the sharing economy. So we've just managed to do this. We have WMT scan going live imminently in the next couple of days, or even sooner maybe. And stage three now is where we're at, which is the remote ownership of air nodes by anybody in the world, and matching them with an air node operator in our local jurisdiction. At this point, we're still managing the network ourselves. We're finding the right people to be part of the sharing economy, but we fine-tuned the sharing economy now. This part is done. Stage four will be Tinder for telecoms, matching air node owners and air node operators separately. I stole that from James, by the way, for 100% disclosure.
I like that. Suddenly, everyone perks up in their chairs. What is he saying? It's like, that's great. Love it.
But the stage four is when we can actually have complete explosive growth, because it doesn't rely on World Mobile to match an owner and an air node operator. Air node operators will have connectivity, will jump on and say, look, I've got this roof, I've got this building, I've got this side of the wall. I want to take X percentage. There's a slider on what you want to take. On the owner side, he says, or she says, or they say, I would like to be able to, I've bought 5 nodes and I want to deploy them. And it will match people intelligently to allow growth outside of World Mobile's management. But of course, as you know, making the mobile network profitable is key, right? And again, I refer to other projects in the sharing economy, in the space, IoT. If it's not profitable, eventually it falls down. And especially if people put a lot of money into owning infrastructure and they're not making money back, what's the incentive? We have to make a virtuous cycle here, right? We have to make something that is pleasing for everybody and just continues to grow into a bigger and bigger wheel until it's a snowball, until actually this can become one of the biggest mobile networks, if not the biggest mobile network in the world. So that's where we're at now, stage 3.
And because many on the channel are interested in investments, like myself, and the token is tradable. That is correct, right? It is.
Yes.
It is live and it is trading. Can you talk about the supply of the tokens? How is that managed?
This isn't really for me. I'm very happy to bring Zach onto another time, but there's a 2 billion supply in total. And our token team are some of the best. The tokenomics that were written by the best in the industry. Many of the top 50 market caps utilize their token models, and they've written a completely custom one for us. And so far, so good. It's working. It's efficient. It's rewarding people. We can probably talk more about the technology around the token than we can about the actual token itself.
Yeah, exactly. That was actually my next question here, that you have chosen Cardano ecosystem while most projects build on Ethereum today. What was the reason, or how did you come to make that journey?
I met with Charles Hoskinson in 2018. I had heard that he was interested. I'd already been working in Africa, in the continent. I'd already been working in Cuba with my brother Josh. I'd already been working in many places to provide the bridge and to actually use microwaves and small satellites and other things to be able to send connections in really expensive places and allow people to reduce the cost of calling. And then I heard that Charles Hoskinson, the co-founder of Ethereum, was building a blockchain to serve the bottom half of the world that don't have banking. It's not exactly banking, but banking the unbanked, let's say that. So I said, wow, this could be a great partner, because in order to bank the unbanked, you actually have to connect the unconnected. So I went up to Scotland. It was a Plutus Fest. Charles did a speech there. And then I went with the rest of the team. We had a few drinks in the pub, and Charles came along and he said, okay, Micky, what have you got? I said, well, look, I've got a way to connect people. He said, okay, Wi-Fi mesh? I said, no, Wi-Fi mesh doesn't work. It's already been proven. You need a hybrid model. This is what we're doing. He had John O'Connor already in Ethiopia, and he said, okay, no problem. Let's see if this is, if you're crazy or this is real. He sent over John O'Connor within a couple of weeks into Tanzania. He met with our local partners, Andy, who's a co-founder, and RJ, who's a co-founder. They showed them the university that we'd built, and John made a call to me over the blockchain. And I think that was the turning point. Ever since then, we started to do our diligence. They started to do their diligence. We did a lot of workshops together. And in 2019, Miami, we all traveled as a team. We did a phenomenal amount of workshops, 6-hour, 8-hour days with those guys and ladies. And then that was it. They realized what we have. We realized what they have. And, you know, it's peer reviewed. Cardano gets a lot of crap in the communities, and there's a lot of FUD. But actually, if you're talking about a blockchain that's built properly, what are you looking at? I'm not going to name names here, but there's blockchains that just go offline with the power of a button. There's blockchains that cost an enormous amount of transaction fees or gas in order to be able to transact. And it's felt to us like IOHK were the engineering side of Cardano were absolutely dedicated to making a set of tools that would function, right? So there was no other choice for us. That was it. We were in, and we said, okay, we're in. And the relationship has, you know, we work with them every day with the IOHK team. They're equity partners in World Mobile, so they own part of World Mobile. They don't own any tokens, so there's no conflict of interest there at all. And they're a great company to be working with, and we'll connect the unconnected, and with their tools and their help and their support, we'll also bank the unbanked.
So you kind of came into this ecosystem as an alignment of, objective, both focusing on Africa and connecting the unconnected, banking the unbanked, and the relationship between the people. But how has it been working technically with the Cardano technology?
So Cardano we use currently as a settlement layer. We're settling there right now with the nodes that we have in Zanzibar. And mostly we're working with IOHK to implement tools like Atala Prism, which is their DID tool, right? For us, I came into this not only banking the unbanked, but I came into this with privacy. So mobile network operators, they know everything, right? They know where we are, where we go, what we do, who our friends are, where we bank, what applications we use. And it's not their fault that they know that. They know that because the way that legacy infrastructure is built, the intelligence agencies, the regulators, they need to have direct access to plain text, open, non-encrypted data to be able to capture a criminal or a tax dodger or a bad guy or a terrorist. But along the way, as mobile network operators have made less, I have to be very careful about what I say here, have made less money because of the Vibers, because of the WhatsApps, because the revenue is gone, there has been selling data, right, of users. And there's many instances of this that you can see online. So I came into this, first of all, I want to protect my users and bring privacy back, because none of us really understand what is happening behind the scenes. None of us understand that a telephone call can be listened to because it's not encrypted, right? So, but I also realized that at the same time, I wanted to do this self-data governance, I needed to conform with the regulator. So I needed someone like IOHK to help me support the whole blockchain element of how I would implement DIDs and how I would create a private key only for the user and only for the regulator, whilst I could say and prove, hey, I can't see anything. This network is not a network about selling your data. This is not a network about intruding on your personal life. This is a network for connectivity and for financial services and value-added services and for entertainment. But what's yours is yours. Now, if you choose to sell that, if you choose to share that, your choice, not mine. But at least you have that singular choice to do such a thing, right? So it was important for me on a technological level to come in and get their support and talk to them and have people that, of course, Google is a wonderful thing. The search engine is a fantastic thing, but we're talking about serious tech here, diving deep. And we needed the scientists, we needed the professors, we needed the PhDs that they had. We're smart, but they're also smart and symbiotic. It totally made sense. And it resonated, right? Straight away. And they saw the potential, we saw the potential. And that's how we came into this. That was the first real conversation.
Yeah. Do you see any technical advantages or disadvantages of using Cardano for this application?
There are many advantages. It's really scalable. It's completely decentralized. Proof of stake works fantastic. There's all of the advantages are there, right? People talk about smart contracts not working. We've got smart contracts working. We've removed a lot of the bureaucratic layers that Telecom has. You know how much bureaucracy, how much manpower you need in that back office in order to be able to do settlements across borders or do all types of things. All of a sudden, by bringing in this technology, by working on custom solutions with IOHK that will be implemented on Cardano specifically for World Mobile and other telecom companies that come into the space. And there's lots of room, right? There's 0 mobile network operators serving the 3 billion that are unconnected. There's 1,000 mobile network operators serving the rest of the world. So we want and we encourage other people to come and join us. And we hope that together we've made the entire ecosystem stronger, not just for Cardano, but for the whole world, where people can come and implement using our SDKs, using our platforms, using our custom side chains, using Hydra and all of these things.
That's very interesting. And if we move on then, something that I often say is that need to have a 10-year perspective with urgency, because on one hand, everything takes a long time. So if not having like a multi-year perspective, not much is going to happen. But at the same time, if not acting with urgency here and now today, whatever great ideas we come up with, someone else will copy
needed now.
Exactly, it's needed now.
It's needed now, and it's being developed now, right? And
exactly.
For example, what we can deploy, what we have deployed now, has fixed a lot of the problems and solutions for Zanzibar. What we would deploy in 6 months' time, or even less, our aerostat will go up in the next month or so. We'll also show the world and show the relevant countries and regulators. Wow! But what we will develop, what we have in the pipeline. I mean, World Mobile, it's unimaginable at the pace that we're running. To how many projects that are happening. This is not 5 guys sitting down coding, making a bridge or a swapping platform or a DEX, or this is building an entire telecom company. So we have like 70 or 80 projects running inside the major projects that we have.
So what are the like
Tender.
projections, like growth? When will people be able to have internet connectivity with this? How many do you think, when, and what is the kind of the of course it's impossible to say exactly, but what's the magnitudes we're talking about?
Once we've proven what we need to prove to the world in Zanzibar, that same technology can be exported to any country. Our limitations will be the production line of aerostats, and we're addressing that as we speak today and yesterday and tomorrow, and supporting. But the same model, the same software, the same everything. The only limitations are frequency, right? Spectrum. So you come into a country, let's talk about USA, you're talking about paying billions and billions of dollars for spectrum. You come into a country in East Africa and you're talking about paying anywhere between 40 to 80 million dollars for spectrum. So what we've also have is we have anti-interference patents that nobody else has, so that we can enable and educate existing mobile network operators to utilize their spectrum that's unused. Now, in the continent of Africa, this is not yet a problem. But if you take the USA, for example, you take the big three, they're under consistent pressure from the FCC to provide coverage, but they can't. It's simply they can't. So World Mobile comes in with the same technology it built in Zanzibar. It comes in with the same technology it deploys in Kenya and in Tanzania and Malawi and other places. And then it takes that same technology, it brings it over to the United States of America, and all of a sudden, the big three have a way to be able to propagate their existing spectrum, either as a wholesale model, B2B, or utilizing it and letting us have some of it, and we pay them for it, both ways. So in terms of growth, the growth is projected to be phenomenal over the next 2 to 3 years. But then we've got then we're talking about the stratosphere after that, right? The stratosphere, James, you will correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're sitting at 300 meters, you can see 60 to 70 kilometers radius. When you're sitting in the stratosphere at 20,000 meters, you're actually talking about 10 timesing, 11 timesing that kind of coverage, right? So then you've got stationary balloons that are sitting up there at 20,000 meters that are then feeding down to the aerostats, which then feed down to the base stations, and this can span a whole country. And at that point, you're talking about bringing on 300, 400 million users in the continent of Africa alone, just through World Mobile.
And when will just for clarity here, maybe you answered already, but just so I get it, when will the first live users be able to use the service for connectivity?
They're using it right now. So we have anywhere between 5,000 to 8,000 live users a day. We could have got a lot more. We could have gone our way and gone and deployed it the traditional way and put out 1,000 air nodes, but that's not correct. Those business models require a huge amount of capex. James talked about it in the beginning of the call. Men to drive back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. If you want to create a network that's going to have hundreds of millions of people, potentially billions of people on there, then you need to make sure you've got this new business model right, the sharing economy. So right now we have around 5,000 to 8,000 unique users daily that are joining the network, and in a month, maybe less, maybe slightly more, the ground station has landed in Zanzibar, and the envelope is there in Zanzibar right now. People will be able to, for the first time, connect to the aerostat. So we're looking probably anywhere between 3 to 6 months before we deploy an aerostat in the United States. And once we deploy that aerostat, then we should be maybe some of the greatest innovators that the world has seen so far, and allow a lot of usage. Then it's about deploying thousands of aerostats across multiple continents and letting them talk to each other. And then the final stage, of course, is the stratospheric stuff. We don't really believe that satellites are a solution to connect the unconnected. You've got a few good projects out there. You've got Space Mobile, who are trying very hard with these kind of football field antennas, the size of football fields, in order to be able to propagate direct signal. But physics is physics, right? Throughput is throughput. So right now, constellations that exist.
Let's take a few questions here on the... So one question is, when is testnet ready? From Andrews.
Andreas, you probably know you have to ask Antonio this question, but we're looking at very soon. We're looking a couple of months, we believe, before we release the first Earth nodes. I guess that's what Andreas is referring to. But we already have centralized Earth nodes running the infrastructure right now. So we are already testing and auditing the Earth node.
Great. Next question I saw earlier here. Why does it need a token?
Okay, so as a centralized body, as a telecom provider, I get a lot of bills in through my. There's many reasons, but let me talk about why. I get a lot of bills through my front door. Telecom companies are often the most sued companies in the world, and it's often being sued by other telcos for not paying their bills. In order to create an ecosystem that is going to grow with explosive growth, you need to be able to assure the people, without your assurance and non-trust from Micky or from World Mobile, that they'll actually get paid. The way that we have a protocol called proof of service. The proof of service is able to understand the service that someone's given, make sure that no one's spoofing GPS like other sharing economies do, make sure that everything is in line, and then automatically distributes the funds for air nodes back in fiat to the person's wallet, or for them to go and pick up from a local store or into their bank account, and for Earth nodes to understand what's going on there. So this is one reason. The second reason is if you actually want to grow a telecom company, it doesn't help if Micky goes and speaks to VCs all day long and funds. In order to have explosive growth, you need to be able to rely on a community to be able to buy in and reduce the capex for a company and to grow your network around the world. And then there's many other reasons: security, provability, self-data governance. All of those are a reason to have the token.
That's great. Another question, only if it's relevant, and if you know. Dave asked, how do you compare with 3Air? I am not so familiar with the company myself.
3Air, they came after us. They have a very similar rhetoric since we've released. We don't compare. We're 100 leagues in a different league than them. They're providing fixed wireless. They have some technology that we were going to try out, but for some reasons that I won't discuss on the call, we didn't end up trying out with them. They tried to jump onto the Cardano blockchain, and they didn't do the things right, and they then ended up moving away from the Cardano blockchain to another blockchain. But there is no comparison. They're just a wireless ISP provider.
Understand. And the one thing that I forgot to say, someone asked about it, I do not own any tokens at this point, and there's been no payment for this video of any kind. So that's not why I'm doing the video. I am interested in the technology. I love this technology. It's been my life for most of my professional life. And now connecting telecom and blockchain, of course, is something that I'm hugely interested in. I want to learn as much as possible, and there is no better way to learn than to talk to the people who are actually doing the work. So that's why I'm doing it. And also because my great friend here in Sweden has suggested I should do that. He's a great Cardano expert, and I trust him, so that's why.
We appreciate it, CTO Larsson. Thank you.
So, while waiting for more comments, are there other key areas that you feel are essential to cover during this call?
Yes, there's one subject that I feel is absolutely essential. So, embarrassingly, I didn't actually know about CTO Larsson. I was in a taxi traveling from London to back to Spain, where I live, and I was wearing a Fulham shirt, and the Fulham shirt has the World Mobile logo on it. And the taxi driver said, "Oh wow, do you know? I've heard about this World Mobile." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'm the founder." He said, "Oh, have you spoken to CTO Larsson?" And I said, "No, I haven't." So your follow came immediately after I'd spoken to him. So we need a big shout out for the taxi driver that actually introduced us. Now, usually they say when you're a taxi driver,
if you're watching later, dear taxi, unknown name taxi driver in London, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you for subscribing.
It also breaks the myth that crypto is going down when your taxi driver talks about it. It's quite the opposite. So it was very refreshing, and I thank that gentleman a lot.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, there is no doubt that this whole technology is in the beginning. When we've seen previous technologies before, and I think we can all recognize that this is the beginning of the blockchain technology. It's not the maturity of it. Then speculative elements, they go much faster. Like they go up fast and they go down fast and so on. But the actual use of the technology, the build out and the maturity of technology, that's a much slower process than the speculative process. The speculative process happens very quickly. And those of you who are following that, you know that we can see that in the tools. We can see that the time frame towards token value against the USD is daily time frame. But if you want to see how a project is evolving against Bitcoin, for example, it's typically the weekly time frame, or at least a slower time frame. Because and if looking at traditional companies, it's usually maybe 2-week time frames to track what is actually happening in this trend, because that's how slowly everything goes, even for the world's biggest successes, looking at Apple or Tesla or whatever your favorite company is. So that's great. Let's see. Yeah. We have a few more minutes. Let's take a few more comments. Why talking about technology? Crypto is not the mobile revolution. It's been 10 years already, but the only real world application is money. Well, it took much longer than 10 years for the mobile phone, which in the end, it turned out every single person on the planet wanted. Everyone wanted a mobile phone. Everyone wanted a mobile phone. And still, it took much. We came nowhere in 10 years into that game. At that time, there was one base station covering. The idea was to have one base station to cover Stockholm. As you highlight, if you build a tower high enough, you can cover the whole city of Stockholm. And the idea was to have one or a couple of base stations, and they had like little houses with a pantry and a bathroom and everything, because it felt like it's like some sort of a headquarter for Stockholm. The base station is there. And then now, if looking out, there are like base stations everywhere, and there are small cells and so on. But that was maybe 50 years ago, and the first generation of mobile before 2G, then it wasn't called 1G because it was the first. It was an analog system, and it was only when and at that time it was like really only very specialized people. Like if you're a veterinarian or something, maybe it made sense to invest in one because you could mount it under the seat in the car. No one could carry around the mobile phone, but you could mount it in the car, and then you could be reached if there is like a cow that is sick or somewhere, because you need to be, you're out driving, you need to be reached. And then came 2G, which dramatically brought the cost down. And that was the first technology that really became widely used. But that was already decades into the technology. And then 2G maxed out because we couldn't expand the data speeds enough to meet the requirements of the internet. Then came 3G, but actually 3G never became the biggest technology at any point of time. It was better, but it was not so much better that it replaced 2G as the biggest technology. It was only until 4G, which was another 10 years later, that it became once again the biggest technology, bigger than 2G. And now we're kind of working on 5G. So it's like, it's so many decades into this technology. And guys, it takes this long, even when you find a technology that is a match with what every single person in the entire world wants, because everyone is using this, everyone wanted it. But technology evolution is fairly slow. So just because we haven't come that far in 10 years with blockchain doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. That's my answer to that. do you plan to work with Starlink?
We already are working.
Exactly. And yeah, someone answered that. Why Africa? South.
I started at the beginning of the call. The continent is the least unconnected continent on the planet. It's the youngest continent on the planet, 19.3 years old, average age. It's a continent that's massively in need and has that appetite for connectivity. The amount of people that we see have cell phones, but then have to walk anywhere between 3 to 7 kilometers to be able to gain signal is phenomenal. Cell phones are the absolute choice device in a village. They go from work, they charge it at work, they bring it home, they download their stuff at work wherever they can find Wi-Fi or wherever they can find connectivity, and then their entertainment. Remember, on the equator, it gets dark at 7 o'clock every single night, every night of the week, of the year. So everybody is primed to be able to connect either via 2G feature phones, 3G, 4G, everything that our stack accepts. So Africa is absolutely a focal point for us and a huge opportunity.
Next question here, and it's phrased like this from Andre Sipos. Please ask for weaknesses of the World Mobile Network. I would maybe understand the question as what are the challenges that you are looking at, because it's important to put on the table so can mitigate the risks and the challenges. What are the biggest challenges?
Spectrum. So it's a national resource, people own it. There's probably $1 trillion of unused spectrum sitting out there. And re-educating, we have a phenomenally large regulation team and market access team that half of their jobs are to travel to regulators and explain to them that, look, we want to connect the unconnected. You have 25, 30 million people in your country unconnected, but we don't want to come in and have to spend anywhere between $40 to $100 million on spectrum for each country we roll into. In fact, what we want you to do is utilize spectrum from other mobile network operators who are not using it. We'll work in partnership with them. Or we want you to give us unlicensed free spectrum, such as TV white space or CBRS. CBRS in the USA, for example, has become unlicensed and anyone can pick up on it. That's how pollen and helium are working. But that model doesn't apply to anywhere else outside of the United States right now. So a huge part is education, and a huge part is making sure that the regulators understands. We're at the ITU with the conference that was in Kigali recently. We spoke to over 30, 40 countries, regulators, the ICT ministers, the people that need this. And slowly, over the last 4 years, we've been educating regulators and the right people. And so far, only a few countries have adopted this, but it's much better than before we started educating them. And this will grow faster and faster. So as they see deployments happening and they see, every regulator really, all they want is for their country to be connected. It's an embarrassment that and a shame for them when they are sitting on their mobile phone in the middle of a city, but then their families sit 20, 30 kilometers away and don't have anything at all. They go to the bush and they go to connect. So this is probably the biggest challenge, education. In terms of technology, business models, we don't see any challenges that we've met so far that we haven't been able to smash down.
Exactly. So next is a related question. And could the nodes as such, like the air nodes, be considered under the telecommunications laws to require licenses to be operated?
Whenever we walk into a country, we buy a mobile network operator license and an ISP license. That allows us to be able to share our connectivity and rewrite policies and rewrite all the different terms and conditions. Typically, telecom companies, although there is a lot of collaboration with interconnects, sharing isn't in their DNA because it's held by 5 or 10 shareholders who are then expecting dividends. There's no real reason to share. For us, it's the exact opposite. The growth, the explosive growth, the only way we're going to be able to connect the unconnected, the only way we're going to be able to provide a solution for the half of the planet that's not online is by collaborating with people. So we rewrite those rules. No, there's no licenses needed, only the licenses that we have, and then we allow and facilitate the network to run.
But if you think about it, I mean, every radio is licensed. So the Wi-Fi access point sitting on your shelf behind you, I think that's that has a license to operate. It's a class license, i.e. you submit one example of the device and they test it and go, yeah, that's good, and then you can ship millions of them. But we have to license wireless, otherwise it won't work and it'll interfere with each other.
Here's an interesting angle here. The average age is very young as well. I think in Africa, or the target segment in Africa, I think it's referring to. Is that an opportunity? Is it easier to kind of get a young person to try something new than, say, in a mature market where people are quite satisfied with the solutions they already have?
So Africa or the continent, Africa is not a country. It is a continent, but people refer to it as a country. But each country inside Africa, they've already leapfrogged us, right? They didn't have fixed connection to the house. They didn't have desktop PCs. Yes, USAID and yes, charities came in and they put PCs in schools, but with no internet connectivity. So the first time people were able to get online really was through a mobile device. And then that shows why Africa also has the largest amount of mobile money wallets in the world. So in many ways, they're so much more advanced than us in using and utilizing the mobile phone. So yes, it's definitely an advantage for us because we don't have to educate anybody on how to use a mobile phone.
All right. We're 5-6 minutes over time already. Any final thoughts? What drives you when you go up in the morning? Both of you. What do you think about?
It's a huge problem, right? And someone's got to fix it. And the fact that every 1 in 2 people can't speak to each other, that's wrong. So that is my number one driver. The next driver, of course, is this is probably the biggest business opportunity that maybe the world has ever seen to fix the last great puzzle that the world has, which is connecting everybody so that we can be in that global village, not half a global village. I love a challenge. It's something we know we can do. So yeah, sure, why not? We're doing it.
Yeah, and I like building technology, so this is a fun thing to build, you know.
No doubt, this is maybe the most fascinating blend of, should I say, old and new technology. I felt when I kind of felt that I was done with the telecom industry, it was really because I felt that I want to look at the next technology revolution, and it would be really fun if those two blend together. Because, I mean, blockchain hasn't really reached so far outside the financial area yet. There's been a lot of ideas. I mean, that was the whole 2017 era of projects. There was a lot of ideas to kind of solve different, shall I say, like a real, people call it real world, but really other industries problems other than financial industries. But it hasn't really happened so much, and it would be, I really wish that we get there, so we can explain to regulators also that this is a technology revolution. Please don't, kill it.
Don't label it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a technology just like all other great technologies of our lifetime, and it would be it's important that it doesn't get stifled too much, that there can be innovation in this space. I really enjoyed the talk. I don't want to overrun too much. Any final words? Otherwise, let's follow up again in a couple of months, see how it's going. And I will definitely follow this project. And not advising anyone to do anything. I'm just trying to provide education. And I hope that you found it valuable. And I had a lot of fun talking to both of you today, as well as the previous time we talked. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah. Really appreciate you. And remember, we're stronger connected. So see you soon. Thank you very much, CTO Larsson, and thank you very much, everybody that's watching and has watched.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, tack.
Over and out.
Over and out.